welcome to Women's Health Chat. Ask Claire for PowerPlate. This week, week 3, we are discussing... Hey guys, welcome back to PowerPlate Australia and New Zealand and our weekly Women's Health Chat. If you're tracking your... this week we're going to be talking about training around ovulation. And if you're tracking your cycle, you know you've ovulated when your core temperature rises. It can rise by up to a full degree in the luteal phase, but preparing for ovulation and ovulating happens or occurs before that happens. So you've got to use a little bit of guesswork when you're tracking your cycle. You know you've ovulated because your temperature rises, but the event has happened a few days before and your training can be modified and probably should be modified a little bit a few days before as well. So firstly, if you don't see a temperature rise in the second half of your cycle, it's possible that you're not ovulating even if you're still getting a period. And this isn't a bad thing per se. Actually, it is. It is. You do want to be ovulating because it's a sign of health. So for women, our fertility is a vital sign. It's something our bodies will take away from us when there's something wrong with us. So, you know, managing our reproductive health is actually kind of vital if we want to be healthy all over everywhere. So if you're not ovulating or you're not seeing that temperature rise, it's probably worth going to see an integrative GP, a naturopath or a fertility expert, even if you don't actually want to have a baby, just to get checked. If it's irregular, if it's absent, it can be exacerbated by stress, which means emotional stress, mental stress, overwhelm, physical stress, including excessively hard or excessive volumes of exercise can contribute to irregular ovulation or not ovulating at all. And you should be discussing these issues with your chosen health expert if they come up for you. In most cases, ovulation doesn't have any effect on your exercise. Hormonally, you can still train hard and it's still good for you. Your testosterone and your estrogen is coming down, but it's still elevated. It's sort of, once your core temperature goes up, it's down. But because they're so involved with your muscle building, you won't have that edge that you had last week when your superpower was stress and high intensity exercise. Strength and high intensity exercise. So you want to exercise. Exercise is good for you. In fact, vigorous exercise from 30 to 60 minutes a day, 5 days a week, has been shown to promote ovulation and promote reproductive health. But more than that has been shown to start interfering with it, especially if you're not covering the cost of that exercise with calories. So you want to make sure your nutrition's up to scratch if you're going to train really hard through ovulation. Otherwise, we're going to start thinking about winding it back just a touch. So before we start, some women will experience pain at ovulation. Most women, maybe it's mild, but if it's severe, it can last anywhere from a few hours to a few days. It, again, doesn't hurt to reduce your training, to just back it off a little bit to something you can cope with. You are more likely to be injured in this 5-day-ish period. So if your training involves power, plyometric work, single rep maxes, lots of changing of directions, again, just bring it back a touch, okay? If you were training 100% last week, bring it back to 80% this week. Still hard, but you want to control the controllables in this period. If the exercise you're doing is a little bit out of your control, you're going to be likely to roll an ankle, or you know, if you're throwing a single rep max over your head, that sort of exercise, it's not ideal at this point. And I'm just going to show you like how to modify last week's program, which was, you know, ridiculously safe how it was. But I'm going to show you how to modify just that touch around this period to make it a bit more controllable for your body. Okay, so for those reasons, we're still going to train high intensity, but our superpower around ovulation, and the thing you want to concentrate on, is technique. I do mean technique in the traditional sense, like your perfect squat, landing patterns, that sort of thing. But that also doesn't mean we can't build diversity into our movements. So you remember last week we did a squat and a push-up matrix where you change something every repetition. You can still do that. It's still important, but again, we'll slow it down and make sure that there is some alignment there, that maybe you're breathing out and lifting pelvic floor. It's about making the movements more controlled, just that little bit more controlled. So without further ado, we are going to get started on some of these exercises. So last week I said take heavier weights to do your squats, right? And on our power plate, off the power plate, we did our heavy squats, and we changed a limb every time we moved, right? And then we did a pulse squat on the plate to overload the legs. Okay? Now, you can use your heavy weights, but because I want to make this interesting, we're going to do our squat matrix, but we're going to matrix using our arms. We're going to drive our arms. So 10 squats, passing a platter, and trying to think of all the ways your arms can move when you do a squat. So just because you're concentrating on technique doesn't mean it has to be boring or perfect in the traditional sense. And then we're going into our little pulse squat, and we're just going to hold. And this is an opportunity to get knees behind toes, in line with hips. You can still matrix it when you're on the plate. You can do a little, I call this a surfing squat, because it's kind of what you do on your surfboard or skiing. And you do that till your legs burn and die. Okay? So last week we did matrix push-up on the power plate, followed by a bench press. Those two exercises, again, super safe. We can still be diverse in how we move our body, but we're going to slow it down, and we're thinking about being aligned through our back. You might also want to think about your pelvic floor through each repetition, and you just slow it down that tiny bit. You still do your 30 hertz, 30 seconds, or 35. You still superset, it still hurts. We do our bench press. I don't have any weights today. Right? And for this one, you could do a bench press with the bar. You could do it any way you like. And just focusing on having a nice clean pathway. But here's the overload in this phase. We're going to back that up with a third superset. 30 seconds just holding. And we add this little extra bit in here because remember, it's still safe to train at a vigorous intensity, which is like 8 or 9 out of 10. But we're just going to moderate it because of that risk of injury. And 30 seconds. I don't even know if it was 30 seconds. All right, our last little Our last little program was a roll-up burpee followed by superset with squat jumps. So the roll-up burpee being the most dynamic thing we did last week, it's this that's probably the unsafe aspect. We're just going to step it out. So on your plates, you step down, hands go down, up we go. Okay, and you can run it. And it's just that millimeter more controllable, right? Remember to squat legs. Then instead of our squat jumps today, instead of these, we're just going to go into a nice little wall sit. Again, we can watch our alignment. We can do things more perfectly. I know that life is not perfect, but from a training perspective, there is preferred alignment and ways of doing things. And this is still exercises. You can hear me puffing. They're a really nice way to just nail in that technique. Okay? Now, if during any exercise you feel joint pain or like ligament pain near a joint, anything that's not like the muscle burn, especially around ovulation, that's time for you. It's a pink flag. It's not a red flag. It's just like a, hey, back it off, change the angle. So if you're doing your wall sit, for example, and you feel it in your knees, then do you still feel it in your knees with your toes out? Do you still feel it with your toes in? Do you feel it in your knees if your heels are up or if your toes are up? And a little experiment like that, come up a bit, might take the load off those ligaments and tendons and again help reduce risk of injury when you're around ovulation. So remember to send me in your questions, guys. Next week we're going to do the luteal phase and then move on to another topic. And if you've got a burning question, I would love to hear about it and I would love to talk about it. Never get tired of my own voice. I'll see you next week.